Hello and welcome to the preliminary 2019-2020 winter outlook. This is for Mid-Atlantic Weather and Loudon Weather, which is two different websites and things I actually work on from time to time. So anyway, let's start off with what I'm going to go over in 2020 here. So the contributor factors that I see for snow prediction, and I think this is consistent. I'm not going to share much new. Guys, if you look at Weather Risk's outlook on weatherrisk.com or Weather Risk on the internet, on Facebook, you're going to see similar types of outlooks. Virginia Weather Network and I pretty much had the same outlook. Honestly, I was working on this right about the same time as he came out. They coincide pretty strongly. So if you look at his and read his write-up, which you probably should, go out and check out vawx.net and check out their outlook as well. Similar to what you're going to see here, but just wanted to go over what I saw as well. Anyway, those pictures, by the way, on the right-hand side are from the blizzard in 2016, which is the last huge snowstorm we had in Northern Virginia. So contributing factors, snow advance index. So we'll talk about that in a little more detail. The quasi-biennial oscillation, the sea surface temperatures, ENSO, which is the El Nino area of the equatorial Pacific, solar cycle, and the groundwater. So let's start off with the snow advance index. So what we're looking for in the snow advance index is the increases in the snow amount that we see in the progression of the advancing snow, really in Asia, Eurasia, really like Russia and things of that nature. If it advances well throughout the entire month, that could be a sign for some blocking to occur in the regions that we need for East Coast snowstorms. I say could be because we've had pretty good signals from this previously and not had the good blocking show up. So anyway, I wanted to share that with you. It is too early, as I mentioned. We're just starting October, so we don't have a long run on this index, but it'll be something to watch throughout the month. You can look it up. Look for Northern Hemisphere snow and ice, and you can actually look at it. I'll show you a chart here in a moment. If we do see that expansion, as I said, there may be indications of blocking. Blocking that we're going to talk about in this. Blocking is how you block cold air and storms come up the East Coast because of the blocking. So blocking brings cold air. Blocking also causes a buckle in the jet stream. Not a buckle, but a slowing in the ability for storms to form along the East Coast and come up the East Coast. Blocking doesn't always mean it's here. It's just favorable blocking for the East Coast happens if the snow advance index advances, or could happen, I should say. And that is the negative NAO, which is the North Atlantic Oscillation. I may mention it a few times in here. If it goes negative, that is a good indication of potential blocking and East Coast snowstorms. So there are even different types of NAO, negative NAO phases that also play a factor. Too much detail, but anyway, that's what's going on. So right now, if you look at these pictures, they look pretty impressive. This was about 5 days ago, and now you see as of yesterday, definitely see this expansion in Asia of snowpack. Hey, good news. All right, so what is a quasi-biennial oscillation? Honestly, I'm not going to go into a lot of details because I don't want to bore my listeners here. But you can find out more if you go to Wikipedia and read about it. It has to do with the winds that are way above the equatorial regions, and they have to do with whether or not they're east and west and things like that. Based on those, you get indexes that are either positive or negative. What we're really looking for is we're looking for something that's neutral or slightly negative in that index, so it's something we can watch. You could go out there and look for ways to see the statistics around this. Looking for about a +5 to a -15 for that index. And as of now, I like what I am seeing. It seems like it's going to forecast to go towards this neutral region, but it is so early. It's way too early to really read it and give you a good indication of what's going on. So it looks like it's good, but we'll see. So next, what we are looking at here are the sea surface temperatures and anomalies. Honestly, in every forecast I've ever looked at in previous years, where I looked at sea surface temperatures and I broke up over the 4 regions I'm going to discuss here, I think it's had a better read or insight into what has happened during the year than what the other index things I just mentioned to you. So that's what I mentioned here. And I really look at 4 areas what is happening around Alaska is very, very important. The equatorial Pacific Ocean, obviously El Nino, La Nina type of setup. That was the ENSO, which we'll talk about a little bit as well. And then what's happening up near Newfoundland. So there's an area up there of sea surface temperatures I like to look at. And then what's happening on the East Coast. So if it's warm along the East Coast or something of that nature, then they can help it. So in these regions, I'm just going to show them to you really quick, and then I'll come back. So here's what I'm looking at. So I mentioned the Alaskan area where I'm looking for temperatures. There's the ENSO region that we're looking for to look at temperatures. Then we have the Newfoundland area that we're looking for temperatures, the sea surface. These are anomalies, by the way. This is not the actual sea surface temperatures. This is the anomalies at this point. And then right up along the coast, how warm it is. You can see some cooler body of water down the southeast. That is likely still due to remnants of Dorian, not remnants, but leftovers from Dorian. Upwelling cooler water from well below the surface because of how strong it was. But anyway, those are the 4 regions. So let's go back and discuss these in a little more detail. So what I mentioned here was happening up near Alaska. So if it's warmer than normal, which it is right now, and it stays like that, it tends to cause the jet stream to ridge there, which goes up into Alaska even further and cause what is known as a negative EPO. If we get that to set up, we can get cool air intrusions, cold air intrusions, that just spill in all the way from upper Canada into all the way across even something called cross-polar flow. So we'll have to watch it. I mean, honestly, this warm body of water, with several storms going through that region, they could get knocked down very, very quickly. So though it looks good now, it could change later. Although I think it was extremely warm. I know it was extremely warm up in that region. So we'll have to see if that plays a big impact on what happens with the jet stream. Equatorial Pacific Ocean, El Nino, as I mentioned before, not much play here, but we did see that it was above normal, not majorly above normal, but above normal. And that does have some play because it could produce more moisture, which could get into some southern streams, southern jet stream type of activity. If that happens to get thrown into some storm systems or phase in, it can help us out. And then what's happening up in Newfoundland, now this one's not a very strong signal at this point, but it is something to watch. If we get a cooler area up there, it can be an indication or cause the possibilities of negative NAO. Again, it's just a factor. It doesn't mean it has to happen. You get a separation of warm water, then a cool pool right near Newfoundland, and another warm body. It could be an indication that we're going to get some blocking up that way. Is it there? It's slightly. I wouldn't say it's overly big, but it's something to watch. And then along the East Coast, if we get warm bodies or have the ocean being warmer than normal, there's more moisture there, which can definitely help aid storm systems and bring stronger systems up the East Coast. You get some stronger storms to wrap up, depending on how close they are to the coast or not. Could matter as far as how much precipitation goes. Warmer water can also mean more mixing scenarios. That's one thing that may be a little bit different on some other forecasts here. I do think we have warm ocean temperatures, especially along the coastal plain. You get a lot more opportunity for mixing. But as we get later in the winter, that mixing scenario becomes less possible. So anyway, just something to note. So again, just going forward here you see those anomalies as I mentioned, and you can see that every one of them is there as something to potentially contribute this year. If I was just looking at the sea surface temperatures, I'd say they favor a better winter if you're a snow lover, but there's not a lot. I mean, any one of these, as I mentioned, other than El Nino, I don't think there's a very strong signal that we would go to a El Nino type of scenario. But El Nino in general doesn't look like a big deal. But the other regions are big players, potentially. I mean, especially that Alaskan warmth. I really like it. So we'll have to see how that plays out. Okay, so looking at El Nino, as I mentioned, something there. I mentioned about the potential there, and that it could have a little bit of impact, but it could also provide some moisture to the storms. And if you look here at the ENSO, or that region, and looking at that things. And by the way, ENSO, I drew a bigger area of where El Nino regions are, and it was a little further south than what I'm showing on that map before, but I just want to kind of show that overall area. But in general, it looks like it's a little slightly above normal here. That's actually a little bit favorable. Around 0.5 tends to be some type of a contributing factor, at least from my memory, I may be proven wrong. Somebody may come back and slay me on this, but we'll see. So what's the last thing I want to look at is the groundwater. Actually, I mentioned groundwater. I forget to mention something else in my overall assessment here. Groundwater. So, yeah, we're in a short-term drought. This drought's been pretty persistent towards the end of summer into this fall. And, boy, the stink bugs have loved it. If you haven't had a lot of stink bugs in your house or around your house, I'd be surprised. They tend to love this type of deal. If it persists, it could have an impact on patterns. It's not just an impact on patterns, but it's also something that shows it does affect the temperatures of air masses and things like that as they come across that area. But I also want to mention that it also points out maybe persistence in patterns, because if there are certain areas that are staying wet and certain areas that are staying dry, that may be an indication of what the pattern is going to continue to show. So my suspicion, though, is that we're going to see a breakdown and we're going to move back to wetter conditions. But as of now, so that's why I said we still look like we're seeing wetter conditions. That was the forecast that was out looked at mid-September, and the Climate Prediction Center over the next 3 months is also predicting above normal or equal chances. So it shouldn't deteriorate or move from anything concerning our weather. The only thing I did not mention in my agenda overview was the solar cycle, and that's what I want to cover next. Solar cycle right now, we're really what's called a solar minimum. Maybe a grand solar minimum based on what I'm hearing. But in general, we're looking at a very low solar impact on our weather. What does this do, really? From the studies and research and information I've seen, it definitely impacts blocking patterns. Again, like the NAO would be a good example of blocking patterns it could impact. When solar minimums have happened in previous eras or time periods or whatever, it does bring cooler than normal temperatures, and even like the mini ice age was during a solar minimum. Things of this nature can happen. So if we are going to see impacts, this is going to be the time where it plays out. Maybe this year, maybe over the next few years. I'm sure there's a difference between the time when that starts to show up and the actual impacts on the weather. But in general, I think, though, it's favorable. So it does correlate to that. And if you look here on the chart, you can see in 2019, we're way low on it. And if you know anything about sunspots and sunspot activity, sunspots have almost been like nothing. So those solar impacts, or like the rays and everything else that come against us, have been much, 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 much lower. So what is our conclusions here? In general, I would conclude that for now, we look very favorable, I'd say, for an above normal winter for snow and below normal temperatures. If not normal to below, I think as you get a little further north and west areas, you're going to get even very favorable for above normal snow and below normal temperatures. The warmth over Alaska like this points to me that this is a good time, and that we could actually see colder conditions earlier than later. Yeah, so we could see things plunge towards the end of November. That's not atypical, by the way. I mean, I'm not saying, ooh, that's different than climate or whatever else. It's not. It's pretty typical, but it doesn't mean that we're waiting until after January to get the cold air to come in. I think the cold air comes in on this side of the new year versus the other side that we've had to wait for in previous years. The last time I saw something like this, I'm not saying it is the year, but the last time I kind of saw things that looked this way was like 2013-ish time frame, and cold air did come in right around Thanksgiving. It didn't get super cold or super warm during the first part of that year, but we did see some cold air and some snow and stuff. During that December. So what does that mean for December? Like I said, I see some possibilities for snow in December, even possibilities maybe of a white Christmas. But I mean, really, it's just chances. We don't have a super high chance that it's going to be. But I'd say, hey, I favor maybe us seeing some snow events, and maybe because of that, we could have white Christmas. I'm a Christmas nut, so that's why I have to mention that. What about January? I'd say we're going to start off pretty normal temperature-wise. So whereas December maybe a little bit colder than normal, January starts off maybe pretty normal. But towards the end of that month, I could really see us plunging very, very cold, possibly for a period. And to lead off that cold, or if that cold happens to retreat or recede at any point, on the plunging or the receding of cold tends to be when storms swing through the area. So I could see us getting a pretty good snowstorm in late January. That's not atypical again. That is the coldest and stormiest time of the year, usually climatologically for us. Although February tends to be the more snowy of months. And in February, so I think, hey, we may start off really cold at a point. And with that could come some snows, like I mentioned. We also may have a period where it's kind of like a dry spell with very cold conditions. Maybe a good lock, a week or two of really cold conditions because of what we call the Siberian or cross-polar flow from Siberia, bringing cold air down in the U.S. because of a pattern known as the negative EPO, which is that region that happens up over Alaska and reaches cold air all the way across the North Pole and brings it down. We'll have to see. That's just a feeling right now, just based on what I'm seeing. March, I don't think this winter is going to break down super fast. It's going to take a while. So March, we may even see another snow. I'm not saying it's going to be like the coldest month or anything, but I don't think it's going to warm up super fast. So early March, we could have snow. And wow, wouldn't that be no big surprise? It seems like every year we eke in a snowstorm at the beginning of March for the last several years. Or try to, I should say. I'm not saying it always happens, but it seems like. So my thoughts, I mean, literally, these are my thoughts. However, they kind of line up with what you saw over at the Virginia Weather Network guys. So again, I like that guy. I mean, I know him very well. Denver's an awesome guy. He and I converse a lot. I said, hey, you are right on with everything I think you're saying. I absolutely agree with. So how can I really differ from what he's saying? Because it pretty much is the same lineup. So let's give them some praise there to say, hey, you kind of summarized what I was already summarizing and agree to. So as we go into this coming year, this is kind of my preliminary thoughts. I'm thinking in the northern part of Virginia up into Maryland and up into New Jersey, we're going to see 125% to 150% of normal snow. In the middle part, I say 100 to 125%. I'm going to definitely say it's probably above 100, but maybe not as high as 125%, but we'll see. Again, 1 or 2 storms. If you get something happening in December, or if we have something extra in March, you definitely can blow these numbers out. So, and then near normal, kind of for the further south and east. And really, I think if you look at the coastal areas and regions, especially coastal plain, that may be the thing that knocks you back some, and that is that the warmth of the Atlantic Ocean could be a factor there. But in general, I mean, these things all point to me for above normal. So what does that really look like? Hey, I'm not going to do the math for you. If you can do math, 125% is multiplying whatever your normal snowfall is by 1.25. 150 would be 1.5 times whatever your normal snowfall amount is. And so if you can do that, that's fine. Obviously, if it's 100%, it's just one. You don't need to multiply. If it's below that, you would just do a percentage, like a 0.75 would be 75%. Hopefully you know this, but hey, I thought I'd share. So pick out where you live and do the math. And here's some numbers maybe for you to look at as far as areas. If you can point out or think of areas that are regions really close to where you live, you can find something that's close. Like I live in Loudoun County, Western Loudoun, which maybe is closer towards Winchester, which we see about 24 inches of snow per year. And that's about right. Between about 22 to 24 inches of snow is probably pretty normal for my backyard. And so then I would multiply that out, and that looks like to 30 to 35 inches of snow. And honestly, I mean, this is the preliminary outlook. I could see things moving towards the higher end on a lot of these if everything starts to continue, or say things continue in a favorable pattern. Maybe it will end up being a little bit higher. So anyway, that's my thoughts now. So again, look at your areas here. I'll try well, I will export this out and put it on the website as well. So that is my preliminary winter outlook. I will do a more thorough winter outlook later in October or early November, probably early November, based on what I'm seeing, and it definitely summarizes what's going on with the snow index and things like that. But if I see anything looking favorable, I'll mention it in my forecasts or my updates and things of that nature. So that is kind of all that I had concerning this outlook. Hopefully it hasn't been too boring for you. And I'd say definitely favors a colder than normal and above normal snowfall outlook for a lot of the areas, especially away from the immediate coastal plains and southeast, North Carolina, South Carolina, westward. But I mean, even there, it's going to be pretty near normal, if not above normal. So, good year for winter lovers, I think. Have a great rest of your day.